Alrighty. Let's get this show on the road. Guess it helps if I boot up Everquest, doesn't it? Let's see. Well, we're just going to go over the starts, so it doesn't really matter which starting server we pick. Alright. So, we're going to go over the class a little bit more in depth. And I'll make sure I link the resources when I break this up into YouTube videos. We'll do Rangers, or Rogues first, rather. But you can find pretty much all the information you need on P99 and Alakazam. So, now you're going to need to reference both of these. Sorry for the delay. I had to break up a cat fight. Because P99 has a lot of really good, what most people consider TLP starting experience, which is Classic, Vanilla EverQuest, Kunark, and Velius. That's the P99, the Classic era. Then you have your Luklin and your Plains of Power era. And that's usually, sadly, where TLPs tend to die off. For better or for worse, depending on how you feel about it. But that's the golden era of EverQuest. And it lasts about a year, and then a new TLP comes out. So, you need to cross-reference P99 with Alakazam, because some of the information here on P99 is, while mostly accurate for the era, is not accurate for TLPs, as some classes have received some quality of life stuff. Like, for example, we'll go to Ranger, who we're talking about today, and we'll go here. Like, if you play Gates of Discord, you get Sav at level 1, but we're going to look at this. Our Rangers get Flame Lick at level 3. On a TLP. But if we cross-reference that with Ranger on P99, they don't get Flame Lick till level 9. See, older EverQuest, i.e. the P99 era, classes only get... pure casters get them about every 4 levels. And hybrid casters, like Rangers, get them every, like, 6 levels. And they don't start getting them till level 9. It's much more smooth and TLP. Like, you have a little bit, and that's also true for the hard casters. You just get a smoother spell progression, which honestly, this is better. The smoother progression is better because when you had this old one where it's like 9, and then you have to wait 6 levels, and then you have to wait 7 levels. What happens when you're level 14? All of these spells, like minor healing, especially for Ranger, it just stops being useful because spells don't scale, really. So you'll find level 14, especially for arcane casters, like right before you get a new pet for Mage in the older era, if you're playing on P99, it's very, 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 very painful when you're a level before you get a new pet. So like here, level 4, when you hit level 7, your pets start getting their shit pushed in, and it's kind of a painful level to an extent. And then you go here, it's the same thing with all casting classes. Now, so they have smoothed that out for all classes in TLP. That's a big thing to keep in mind. Now, the first thing we're going to go over is, I mean, the easiest way to say it is it's a simpler class, which is Rogue. Rogues are if you just want to do damage and you don't want to be responsible for anything else ever, rogues are a pretty good class for you. Well, you do have some side things you can do to help your party, but you don't have spells, you don't have heals, you can't tank. And let me tell you right now, if you're playing a rogue and you have any want to solo, do not. The worst soloing class ever, really. And not just for an EverQuest, just period. Now, the good news is that you have a good selection of races as a rogue, and you have a good selection of deities as a rogue. Now, first thing about rogue is you need to know what are your good stats, which is you're going to want strength, stamina, agility, dex, whiz, int, and ka. Nowhere near as important. Now, there's two schools of thought on agility, and one is you hit 75 agility, and you never want to touch agility again. I actually disagree with that, because that's only useful in a vacuum. An EverQuest, as you take damage and your life gets lower and lower and lower, you start to lose agility. Once your agility drops below 75, you start to take mitigation penalty, avoidance penalty, and you start to move slower. That is mitigated. If you have 100 agility as a dark elf, it'll take you longer to hit that 75 agility threshold and start moving slower than if you had a 75 agility. It's a minor benefit, but a lot of people consider anything over 75 a waste of agility. I highly disagree. It does have a benefit. Now, don't stack agility for mitigation. It's pretty pathetic when it comes to mitigation, but it will save your life if you have a higher agility. So, what's the most important stat in the game for rogue? Now, you would think dexterity, but really it's strength. Strength determines your maximum and average damage. And it also, and not just for their normal auto attacks, but also their backstabs, which backstab is going to be a humongous part of your utility and damage, especially when you start getting your specialty backstabs. And it also increases the rate you learn backstab, or so people say. And of course, it affects your ability to carry gear. This says to carry coins. This is no longer relevant on the TLP. The gear, however, is very relevant because rogues wear chain. They actually get respectably heavy armor. Not that it does them any good. That gives them a little bit of survivability. Now, the reason rogues can't solo is because rogues do it from behind. They lose access to pretty much their entire class if they're not standing behind something. At least in a combat sense. Now, so when it comes down to it, if you want to look at your physical stats here, strength, stamina, agility, dex, when it comes right down to it, barbarians are the best rogues. It is really that simple. Is it by an insurmountable amount? No, not even. Like dwarves, great rogues. They have 13 less strength, 5 less stamina. They have 12 less agility, but they have 20 more dex, and dex increases your chance of learning. You're getting skill ups, and skill ups are very important. Once your skill ups start getting like high, when you're in say level 50, each point of skill up is really hard to get. Dexterity helps with that. And second, rogues have a lot of good proc weapons. And dexterity boosts your chance to proc. It improves your procs per minute. So that actually adds up. Wisdom, intelligence, charisma, however, of extremely questionable use. You only really need whiz and int on a rogue if you're going to trade skill. Which, I mean, that's up to you. And charisma improves sale prices. But when it comes to just pure what a rogue's job is, which is stab things until they stop moving, these three stats are not of a huge benefit to them. Now, and stamina kind of speaks for itself. Hit points. Now, granted, you shouldn't be taking damage as a rogue, if at all possible, but when you start raiding, you can't help but take some cleaves and hits and 360s and tail swipes and all that good stuff. So the stamina doesn't hurt. Now, good news is rogues have access to a lot of religions, including agnostic. As a rule of thumb, if you can be agnostic, pick agnostic unless you're role-playing or there's a very, very specific piece of gear that you want. Like, say, when I play Bard, I pick Vishan. It's mostly neutral, but it gives me access to hot pink armor and the pop era, so I shoulder that burden. Now, for secondary bonuses, now here we have their skills. Rogues, they dual wield at level 13. Huge boost to their damage. They get backstab at 10, and if you're grouping, that's when rogues come online, is when they get backstab. Now, you have to be careful with it, because backstab at those low levels, nobody has good aggro control. So, when you backstab, you're probably going to eat a couple hits. So, if you're low on health, you've already gotten smacked around a little bit, you might want to tone down the backstabs while leveling, unless you're sure it'll kill them. Double attack is a big deal. Now, double attack doesn't mean that you necessarily swing twice. It's a chance to swing twice. When it happens, amazing. But it's not as reliable for rogues as it is, say, for warriors, but it's still a big deal. Intimidation is kind of like a pseudo-fear. It's very unreliable. Disarm does exactly what it sounds like. You disarm the mob and reduce incoming damage. You shouldn't be tanking. So this is nice if your tank is taking too much damage, but it's not as useful on a rogue as you would think. And Riposte, again, it's another one of those. With this ability, every time you are hit and Riposte, you get one free attack. This might as well, to an extent, be a dead skill, because under no circumstances should you be getting hit as a rogue. If you are taking the swings as a rogue, you're not backstabbing. And this damage will never, like, over the course of an entire fight, won't equal a single backstab's worth. So, now it's something. If you backstab something, pull aggro, get swing, get a riposte, it's hilarious. But don't count on riposte, because this right here is your class, backstab. Rogue only ability, which deals damage with a piercing weapon equipped in the main hand. Now, when you hit the Lucklin arrow, when AAs come in, you start getting new backstabs, and they're freaking wild. But that'll be a separate video, the Lucklin and Pop era, because it's really almost a new game, and it will require a new class guide. This is just for the P99 era. Now, one of the claims of fame of Rogue is their sneak skill, which is kind of like a pseudo-invisibility. Now, if you just kind of walk in front of mobs, they're going to see you. And it doesn't really work on an undead. But this right here, these two combos, hide and sneak. Now, sneak lets you move silently so mobs don't turn and look at you. Hide lets you have a pseudo-invisibility. This makes rogues one of the best classes in the game because their totals are so high. They're very, 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 very good at sneaking through dungeons to grab corpses to bring to the entrance for clerics to resurrect so people can get their XP back. Invisibility doesn't work on undead, but sneak is very, very nice because as long as you're hidden and sneaking and you stay behind the undead, there's a chance that they're not going to turn around and smack you. Picklock, actually a nice bit of utility. It lets you skip some things like having to get the key and Befallen to get to the later dungeon. Not that it's that hard, but Picklock does come up. And the only other class that can do it, as far as I know, is Bard, and they're much, much worse at it. Pickpocket is fun. Make a couple bit of extra plats. If you do it on NPCs in town, the guards are going to smack you. But it's fun. It can get you some extra stuff. Since traps doesn't really come up until Lost Dungeons of Norath, which is way past. This is kind of past when a TLP's lifespan. So let's not. Safe fall. It reduces your fall damage. Anyone who played in on P99 or during that era will tell you this right here has saved many a player's life in Kelethin when they're not paying attention and they walk off a platform. It's not not a ton of combat utility, but when it saves your life, you are just so grateful you have this ability. Now, two very, very, very important skills for rogues. Apply poison and make poison. They're the only class in the game with access to poisons. And it's going to make up a large portion of your DPS. And it's also going to make up a large portion of your utility. So do not sleep on these two. So whenever you're killing, farming and unrest, make sure you save things like your zombie skins and stuff like that, because you need those for poison vials. So we'll go ahead and click poison. This is, P99 has a nice poison guide, for leveling it up. Then you have, so you have, look at this, huge list of poisons. Look at this, huge list of poisons. And they do everything from hasting to snaring to nuking to reducing strength, to increasing strength and while lowering HP. Like here, Berserker Madness 4. Increase strength by 41 to 100. Increase AC by 0 to 18. Decrease HP when cast by 11 to 70. Decrease hit points by 61 per tick. Just kind of almost like a pseudo spell for rogues, but it's a proc, so keep that in mind. It's not necessarily the most reliable thing in the world. Disarm traps, once again, mostly relevant in Lost Dungeons of Norath. Alcohol tolerance is a really neat one. It reduces the negatives of drinking alcohol. You would drink alcohol to increase your strength, which is not the worst thing in the world for a rogue, because getting drunk increases your strength and stamina, but it lowers your armor class, your wisdom, and your int, and technically your attack, but rogues tend to have high dexterity, so their attack score is a bit higher. You don't use wisdom and int. You definitely use strength and stamina. And then your alcohol tolerance will reduce the impact on these stats, such as you'll lose less wisd, int, attack, and AC. But it also does reduce the benefit as well. But basically, it makes the numbers more controllable. So you'll have to drink more alcohol, but it lets you fine-tune your positives and your negatives. So like it'll take, if you have max alcohol tolerance for TLP, it'll take you like 20 drinks to get strength. But it's very, very useful for rogues, warriors, monks, rangers will use it if they're out of mana. Begging, never really implemented in the game as far as I know. Bind Wound, very, very, very nice. Bind Wound lets you restore HP out of combat, up to 50% of your HP. If you're in a group, not as important. Very important if you're soloing. You shouldn't be soloing as a rogue, so Bind Wound is not as important on a rogue as it is, say, a warrior or a monk. But, hey, it's something. Now, something else to keep in mind when you're creating a character in EverQuest, such as you want to make a rogue. See, we click rogue. Make sure you like how you look. You know what? Because there are stat caps in EverQuest. So barbarians have an easier start as a rogue because of their higher starting stat totals. Everyone in the game can cap their stats. So the most important thing is if you like the look of Dark Elf, will you have a harder start? Yeah. You shouldn't be soloing anyways. Find a friend, level up. Yugda Bretsum here in the chat played a rogue. I forget what race you were. But I played a ranger, and we had a hell of a lot of fun with that duo. It was one of some of the most fun I've ever had in EverQuest was leveling that duo. Rogues, of course. And then we have access to the melee classes, get access to tanks, get access to disciplines. So you have Fearless Discipline, which is immunity to fear and all spells that cause fear. Incredibly useful if you're fighting in a raid that fears, or if you see a fear coming in and you're level 40. Half elf, that's right. This right here can not only save you, but if you get feared at a bad time into a pack you're not ready for, this can not only save a group, this could save a raid. If you get a bad fear and you run into a bad group, you can kill 40 people. This right here is actually sick. Counterattack discipline. Every time you get hit for 9 seconds, you're riposte. As stated, if you are popping this, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong in a group. Now, it can technically save a pool if your tank dies in a group and you're next on the aggro list and it's beating your ass. This could help. Hopefully, it never comes to this. Deadeye discipline increases your chance to hit for 18 seconds. Straight DPS increase. Nimble discipline allows you to avoid most attacks. Once again, this is for pseudo tanking. Hopefully, you never have to use this. This right here, kinesthetics discipline, you double attack every round, and you dual wield with your offhand every round. Straight, pure 18-second DPS increase. Very, 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 very nice. Very nice. Blinding speed discipline. It's a self haste. Haste is very easy to calculate in EverQuest. If you have 10% haste, you do 10% more DPS. It's that easy. Duelist discipline, increase the damage you do by all your melee attacks by double for 12 seconds. So you actually have a nice suite of defensives if you need them. Hopefully you don't need them. And a bunch of DPS increase. Now, be careful when you use this, because you do not want to pull aggro from your tank. Because if you pull aggro from your tank, you're not backstabbing. If you're not backstabbing, you're not an asset to your group, sadly. Backstab really is your class. Now, rogues have tons of gear. Now, we're going to go over to... rogues, unfortunately, are very, very weak at launch. They get much better in Kunark, and they stay about that level in Velius, and then they get much, much, much stronger, as do a lot of weaker classes in the Luckland Pop era, because alternate advancements really do change how a class plays. Now, I'm not going to go over these in detail. That's a different video. But let's see. There's archetype class. Here we go. Chaotic Stab, like this one right here. This ability will allow you to do minimal backstab damage on your backstab attempt, even if you're not positioned behind the monster. Now you can backstab from the front. Now, you'll always do the minimum backstab damage. But this right here changes you from not being able to solo greens to being able to solo maybe the blues. So next up, and then of course, you have one-handed blunt, one-handed slash, piercing, throwing. Piercing, this is the single most important melee skill. You want to try to keep all your melee skills up because you never know. But this one, piercing, this is the important one because this is what turns your backstab on. Now, Rogue's going to be a little short simply because Rogue is a simple class. Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Next up, we're going to have Monks. Now, monks are... Look, I'm just going to come out and say it. Monks are overpowered. Especially during the launch era. Monks are by and far the highest raid DPS. Top 3 for group DPS. Top 4 for group tanking. They're tied for best poolers. And it all comes down to one thing, which I'll get into in a little bit. But for the P99, now that also means, by the way, if you want to get invited to groups and stuff, you might want to consider not being a monk for the simple fact of half the damn servers are monks on launch. Monks and mages are everywhere at launch. Now, if you want to be a Kung Fu man, go for it. Now, I do suggest thinking about waiting till Kunark to roll a monk because you can only be a human for the first couple of weeks, which is the classic era. Then when Kunark comes out, which in my opinion is when the game EverQuest became EverQuest for real, you get access to the Ixar, so you at least have some variety there. Now, humans have slightly higher strength, slightly higher stamina, which leads to slightly higher HP. They have way less agility. That's not as important because of way monks scale their armor class. They have less dex, but they also have less wisdom, same intelligence, same charisma. Once again, these 3 stats, not as important for monks. Monks are kind of like a tricksy rogue. So it comes down to, do you want the humans bonus strength and start on, and humans get some pretty neat monk quests, or do you want the XR racials? And I do believe humans do slightly more barehanded damage, but it's not that big of a deal. Like it's not that big. And of course, your starting stats. I should have done that with Rogue, but starting stats for monks, you kind of want to put all 20 in strength or all 20 in stamina. More HP or more damage. These 2 stats are pretty much all you care about. Now, we don't need any of that. Now, monks have a couple of special things that we have to talk about. And we'll do that first. Monks have a special hand-to-hand damage delay chart. So at levels 1 to 4, humans get the headband quests, and then XR have a couple of XR-only quests, such as for leather armor and stuff, because monks can wear a surprising amount of heavy armor. They can wear chain in some situations. It's actually kind of wild. But we're going to get into why that's not actually something that's as useful as you'd think. Monks tend to stay around the cloth leather because of a special weight restriction. Oh, I take it back. XR do slightly more damage than humans. No, slightly less. Let me see. Ratio 436. Yeah, slightly less because they have slightly higher delay. So ever so slightly. But they have a special, and this right here is why monks are king of the P99 era, because their bare hands straight up get better damage ratios than melees get access to with weapons. They have to make it up in procs. Monks do just have ready access to very good damage ratios at all points of their career, without having to farm. Hey, a new expansion just popped and we get a level increase. Monks continue up their chart while everyone else has to figure out where the hell they're getting their weapons and contest farms. And that's a big thing, is contesting camps. Oh, yes, okay, Ranger, or let's say there is a nice two-handed sword for Shadow Knights, Paladins, and Warriors. Cool. You have to contest the camp, and you have to wait for it to drop. Meantime, the monk is just punching stuff to death and increasing his damage ratio. Now, here's the big thing. Now, once again, this is why you have to cross-reference this with P99, is because coins on TLPs do not have weight. So monks can carry money on a TLP. Now, monks start with a weight limit of 14.9. If you go above that, you start taking penalties to your AC. That's not necessarily true. You start losing your AC bonus. Monks get a pretty hefty bonus per level to their AC, which is avoidance and mitigation. And then starting at level 15, and then every 15 levels thereafter, I think it is. Yes, they get a 1 point increase to their weight limit. Never go above this if you're soloing or tanking. This right here will get you killed if you go over it. Be very, very careful. And this is why weight reduction bags are the single most important piece of equipment for monks. Other than like a fungi tunic. But a lot of monks will save up their first set of platinum to get weight reduction bags, so that way they can actually care. While they're good at farming, and they're good at killing things, and they're good at soloing, they suck at farming platinum until they get their bags, because they just can't carry the loot. Unless they have a friend, who's usually a shaman, who carries all the loot for them. That's a different animal. We're talking about monk in a vacuum for that. Now, monk combat skills. Let's see. What monk combat skills? Here we go. Monks have access to one-handed blunt, two-handed blunt, defense like every class, hand-to-hand. Once again, this is their most important skill because this determines how often they hit and how much they progress in the chart. Offense and dodge. They start with dodge at level 1, which is a great mitigation boost at level 1. They start with dual wield at level 1, which gives them a chance to hit with their offhand, whether it's got a weapon or not. Huge damage increase at level 1. Kick. I mean, it's a kick. It's extra damage. It's a button they get to press to do more damage. Throwing, it lets you pull at range. This is actually, you wouldn't think it, but throwing is actually one of Monk's most important skills. Make sure you keep throwing up to date. It's very, very, very important for the class. And then Mend, which is a monk-only self-heal that gives them 25% of their health if it succeeds. It's got a timer on it, but it's got a high failure rate when you first get it, but make sure you're hitting it on cooldown to skill it up. And it can damage you when the skill is low. Once you get it to around 100, its success rate skyrockets, and it'll stop damaging you. It still might not work, but this right here is one of Monk's lifebloods. You just have a 6-minute 25% health buff. Or, well, heal. It is tremendous. Sorry for all the coughing. I've long COVID. Now, round kick is an upgrade to kick. And you'll notice this as a monk goes up in levels. They'll get access to better clicky attacks. Trainable at level 5, superseded by Tiger Claw at level 10. Till eventually you get up to Dragon Punch. You get a Shoryuken as a human. And if this matters to you, you know, if you want to throw dragon punches and be Ryu, you want to be human. Whereas Ixar have a really sweet tail swipe where they smack you in the face. Now and that continues round kick, Tiger Claw at level 10, Eagle Strike at 20, Dragon Punch Tail Rake at level 25, Flying Kick at level 30, and that'll replace Dragon Punch and Tail Rake, and you jump and drop kick the poor guy. Does lots of damage. It's just extra damage. So, monks get block at 12, which lets them avoid all damage from a physical attack. It only works against targets in front of you. Monks are very, very, very viable tanks, especially in a group setting, and they can tank in a pinch in raids. Like if the boss is at 15% and the tank goes down, monks can very, very capably tank that last 15%. Now, it might be stressful, but they can do it. At level 15, very early in their lifespan, they get double attack. So now they have a chance to double strike with their main hand and then hit again with their offhand, giving them 3 attacks during a round. Very, very, very good. And as your haste goes up, you're doing more base attacks, which means you have more double attacks. Now, Feigned Death is why throwing is so important. Feigned Death is you pretend to be dead and mobs, you shit your pants and mobs are like, ew, this guy pooped himself. I don't want to touch him. And they walk away. This is one of the most powerful skills in the game. There's just really no getting around that. What this does is it does 2 things. If a monk pulls with, say, a shuriken with his throwing skill, which is why throwing is so important, it lets you pull at range, and something patrols over or something was out of position and more things than you can handle are coming to your group, you poop yourself and lay down. And the mobs, they're like, ew, your guy smells like poop. And they'll stand around for a little bit to make sure you're really dead. And then they walk back to their camp. While they're walking back to their camp, they might have spread out more. It all depends on how things are going. And that'll let you split camps to where, these 2 are so far away, I could pull this one on the left, and the 2 on the right won't come, even though when they're all standing next to each other in the camp, they will. This gives monks at level 17 just unreplicatable ability to pull effectively at these levels. Now, bards catch up and arguably do it better at high levels, and Shadow Knights can also do it. Monks are just the best at the Feigned Death pulling. There's no one, because it's manaless. If a Shadow Knight does it, it's going to cost them mana, which comes with a whole bunch of caveats. You got Intimidation. Intimidation, it used to be called Instill Doubt. It's a chance to fear. If I don't recommend using this unless you're running for a zone exit, because fear will get you killed. Whether it's cast on you or it's cast on an enemy, fear will pull additional packs and get you killed if you do not have a way to slow that feared target down so you can control where it's going. Monks have riposte, just like rogues, where when they get hit and they get a riposte proc, they punch back. Much, much, much more useful for monks because they don't rely on being back and they can actually take a hit. So riposte comes up way more often for monks in a group setting. Less in a raid setting unless they're emergency tanking. But in a group setting, or solo, especially solo, riposte comes up constantly. Very, very good. Alcohol tolerance, good for monks, not as good because where monks are getting hit, unlike rogues. Lowering your AC could be a bit of a weird thing. Bind Wound, really nice. Get yourself up to 50% with Bind Wound, then Mend, gets you up to 75% health. Very, very nice. Ixar have a racial forage, so they can find food and water. That's only Ixar monks. Monks also have Sneak. So, you know, we talked about it before. It makes mobs that you're not in front of less likely to notice you. So we have monk disciplines. They have the fearless discipline like rogues do, where you're immune to fear and all spells that cause fear for 11 seconds. We've already covered that in rogues. This can save not only you, but your entire group in your raid, because if you get feared at a bad time and run into a pack, that's a lot. You can cause a lot of chaos for your group in raid. Stone Stance discipline is this is your emergency tank stance. You pull up, okay, the tank's going down. I need to tank this bad boy. You pop Stone Stance Discipline. You get 60% damage reduction on top of your massive AC and avoidance, on top of your block, on top of your riposte. It'll let you... Now, granted, you got about 12 seconds to do it before you get 3-shot by the boss. But this can save a raid. Or it can save a group. You never know. Thunder Kick Discipline. Your next flying kick does more damage. It's just that simple. It's on a 9-minute cooldown. If you're pulling a named mob, you pop this, you kick it in the face to establish aggro, and then you tank the group mob. Or, you know, you can also use it to finish off a mob. Oh god, it's running and it's running towards a pack. It resisted the snare. The nuker's out of mana. Pop this discipline, kick it in the back of the head, collect loot. Whirlwind Discipline allows you to riposte every single attack that's made against you from the front. This is actually pretty sick. It's on a 60-minute cooldown, so it's not something you can use all the time. But if you pulled, say, 2 extra mobs and you really need to burn them down, this is actually a considerable amount of damage, and the damage goes up with the more things hitting you because you riposte more. But this is one of those lose softer abilities. If you're using this, your group has messed up, has overpooled, or the tank is dead. It's another one of those, hopefully you never have to use this abilities. Void Dance gives you the chance to dodge all melee. Well, you do dodge all melee attacks. This right here, you really want to save this for when you're running for a zone line. If there's a train or you overpooled or a mez breaks or whatever, and everyone's like, head for the zone line, we're all gonna die. You pop this. It's effectively 8 seconds of invincibility to melee, and it's not to the front. It's from all directions. Head for the zone line. You've got 8 seconds where melee can't hurt you. Now, if you get rooted by a caster and nuked, I can't help you, but... Then you have Inner Flame Discipline at level 56. Your attacks will do way more damage, at double. And you use this mostly during like burn phases of a boss, or, oh, the boss is at its last 10% and half the raid is dead. Can we finish it? This is one of your emergency DPS buttons. That's something that's different about EverQuest and say World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14 is you don't use your DPS buffs on cooldown. They have huge cooldowns. They are, oh god, it's almost dead, but we're dying. Can we finish it buttons? 100 Fist Discipline is a lot of fun. Increases your attack rate, so you have a higher chance to hit, or you attack faster and damage. It's fun, but it's not as good as Inner Flame Discipline, so you really don't use it that much, even if it is funny. Silent Fist, it's basically a buff for Dragon Punch, and which means Silent Fist Discipline, if your Thunder Kick Discipline, let's say your Flying Kick, you want to keep Dragon Punch on your bar because, oh, well, this is off cooldown. Your Dragon Punch will do more damage than a base Flying Kick. And same thing with Eagle Strike. You want to make sure you keep those on your bar just because they're nice DPS buttons. Now, here comes the big difference between humans and Ixar, and this is where you need to go. Humans are welcome everywhere. Monks are neutral for the most part. You could go anywhere you want in the world, really, and not be harassed by most civilized races. Ixar, on the other hand, woke up and chose violence, ate babies for breakfast. Everyone thinks they're great big jerks. Even Inaruk is like, hey, he's the god of hate. And he's like, man, y'all hateful. Calm yourselves. But where you pay for all of that hate, and the Ixar social repercussions diminish as expects go on. Once you get to Planes of Power, it's not as big of a deal. But what you get for that is almost, look at this, 7 sitting at level 60 regen, 4 standing, 5 feign death versus 18 sitting, 14 feign death, 12 standing. Now what this lets you do, if you're an Ixar, is you can feign death in the middle of a dungeon and just effectively safely regenerate HP if a pull goes wrong. You can pull 2 mobs, kill one, know you can't kill the second one, feign death at its feet, regen the health as an Ixar, and then you stand and go, haha, surprise, I was alive all along, and you kick them in the balls and take his stuff. It's pretty great. And there's also Ixar come with, I think it's a 15 armor class bonus at level 1. Let's go double check. Once again, P99 Wiki being an incredible asset. Now, if some things are wrong, yep, here we go, 15 AC bonus. That's 15 AC bonus is banned. That's a piece or two abandoned. There we go. We'll go to banded armor set. Look at that. Banded, one of the most coveted sets of armor in the game at early levels. Well, even mid levels. You'll use banded for a long time in EverQuest if you're a melee class. Look at this. 6 AC, 6 AC, 2 bracers. So it's more than 2 pieces. The banded mail, the chest piece. Ixar just get a racial banded mail that stacks with other armor. It's hefty. It's a hefty amount of AC. Now, as stated, monks can only be Ixar, and I'm including Ixar because really the true vanilla experience only lasts a couple weeks. So you have Ixar monks, which I think look really cool. And if you're afraid of social repercussions, you play a human. When it comes right down to it, Ixar are kind of the superior choice. Yes, they have one less delay on their fists, but all the other benefits kind of greatly outweigh it. You really only want to roll a human monk if you're like, I want to play a monk the whole time, and you're starting a monk. Now, that being said, nothing wrong with a human monk. You're still going to be arguably the best class in the game. It's just, do you want to be the bestest race in the game too? It really is that simple. Where's the monk AC chart? Do they have that on P99? Monk, okay, I wonder if they have an AC chart for monk. Because I'm actually don't know what it is off the top of my head. Here we go. Monk AC and weight. That is not what I'm looking for. Oh, and before I forget, Monk's hands become magical at level 30. That is a big... That is not a big a deal anymore because they've changed the way... you don't need magic weapons to hurt things like ghouls and scarecrows anymore. But if it ever comes up for you, you know, hooray. Let me see. Where... I can't find... an AC for monks. Well, if I find it, I'll patch it into the video when it goes up on YouTube. Next up, we got Rangers. Rangers are near and dear to my heart. They're my second favorite class after Bard. I love playing Rangers. Even if, like, everyone thinks they're stinky and smelly. Like, people downplay. People sleep on this class. I'm sorry. I disagree with you, EverQuest fan base. You sleep on Rangers. Are they, like, blunt instruments like a monk? No. But, man, you could do some amazing things with a ranger if you're willing to put in the time and effort. They're half warrior, half druid. They get access to druid spells and a couple of unique ranger-only abilities and pump out considerable DPS. Now, here's the thing. People are like, oh, rangers are doo-doo when the game launches. And they're less doo-doo in Cunark and they're less doo-doo in Velius. Guess what? When Lucklin rolls around, watch Sir people re-roll to Ranger because Ranger becomes big boy DPS. I mean big boy DPS. Now, there can only be 3 classes, or 3 races, I'm sorry. Half-elf, human, and wood elf. I mean, if you like being a smelly elf, you go wood elf. There's really not a whole lot of reason to go one otherwise. Like, there's no nice way to say it from a pure power gaming perspective. Wood elves are smelly. I don't like them. Half elves are less physical than humans, but they have a higher dex and a much higher agility. But they have much lower wisdom than humans and wood elves. I guess wood elves do have higher dex and wisdom, which means they have a little bit more mana and a little bit more weapon skill up capability. But when push comes to shove, humans kind of have the stats you want a ranger to have. Followed by half elf, and I would put wood elf as the weakest because that 70 strength, they get extra agility, and they get extra wisdom, but not a terrible amount over humans. Now, half elves get dumpstered in wisdom, so you'll have a lot less mana. Now, we're going to not use P99 for ranger spells because this is not accurate for a TLP. That's why you also need to cross-reference it with Alakazam. Now, rangers have a couple of spell lines. Now, they have, tons of spells. Look at all this. Whee! For a melee class, or technically a melee class, look at all these spells. But I'm not going to cover every single one of them because I would like to see my children again before I die of old age. So I'm going to talk about some very, very important ones. Flame Lick. Probably one of their most important spells. It's not that great on a druid. Druids get Flame Lick and they use it at low levels, but it's not like a huge deal for them. It's a massive deal for rangers. One, it's extra damage, and it's cheap. It's mana efficient. Like, look at that. Once you get to a certain point, it does 17 damage per tick and costs 12 mana. It does more damage per tick than it costs to cast at all, which is a huge return for the mana, and rangers don't have a lot of mana. It's a big deal. It also decreases AC by 3. Now, why this is a big deal is when you attach a debuff to a damage ability, so decrease AC, stuns, stuff like that. It actually it gives increased threat to the dot. And this right here ticks every time. It's important. And the AC by 3 also increases your chance to hit with your bow, your entire party's chance to hit with melee. I mean, it's only 3 AC, but hey, 3 AC is the difference between hitting and not hitting, bud. Very, very important. This is your primary aggro line. It generates a ton of aggression. And it's just a nice source of extra damage for a very cheap price. They get animal lulls. Not as important. This isn't your job. This is bards and rangers. Lulling an animal, I mean, it can come up, but your class is not built for this. It's just another tool in your toolbox. Now we have the important spell. One of the most important spells of rangers. Snare. Decrease movement speed by 41 to 95% at level 16. 95% movement speed reduction at level 16 for 15 mana. So a mob is moving at 5% speed. You're a bow class. Anything you land snare on, you get several free attacks on, or you can cast your dots on it and just kind of backtrack. Or you can, if you're teaming up with somebody who can fear things, they can fear it, you snare it, and you walk behind it and beat it into the ground. Now, rangers do get a fear, but it's an animal-only fear, which lets them specialize. If it's a animal that's outside, rangers are really good at killing all of Tunair's creations out and about in the wild. They get a druid's AC and max hit point buff line. Very important. They get it way later than druids, but hey, you're a melee class who is actually a very, very, very good group tank. Very good group tank. I would argue when it comes to group tanking, rangers are third. You got paladins, shadow knights, and then I would say rangers are the third best group tank. And yes, over warriors. Warriors are amazing, incredible raid tanks, irreplaceable. They're not great as group tanks. And I told you before, monks can tank in groups. They will not out-tank a ranger. Rangers just put out so much aggro. They're squishier than monks, but they put out way more aggression. Now you have your healing line. Once again, very important. I mean, you never get good healing. You'll never be a party's healer, but you can patch up wounds. Like, oh god, this guy's going to die. You can give him a little HP buff. It's also nice for if you're going to sit and med anyways. Like, oh no, my wizard buddy, he's out of mana. You might as well top off with minor healing and sit. It's a tool in your toolbox, even if it's not one of your primary tools. Fire resist buff, nice. I mean, it's a fire resist buff. You put it on your bar if you're getting hit with fireballs. You cast Endure Fire, and then you take it off your bar and put a spell that you actually need on, and then just cycle it back on your bar when you need to. We're not going to cover Luckland spells because that's, like I said, that's a different thing. Even if rangers get way better in Luckland. Dance of the Fireflies, you summon a Firefly Globe. It lets you see better at dark. Not very important on a TLP. Stuff that's dark is not nearly as crippling as it was when the game first came out. You get your agility buff. Very nice for rangers because if you're tanking, agility is mitigation, agility is avoidance, and agility is technically movement speed. It doesn't make you move faster, but it helps keep you from moving slower as you take damage. Very, very, very nice. I mean, is agility the most important stat in the game? No. But hey, you have an agility buff, use it. Cure Poison. Does what it says on the tin. It helps cure poisons if you poisons at low levels, especially. Hey, Yugna, you're in chat still, I hope. How many times have you been bit by a snake and died? Because you killed it, but the poison got you. It's happened to all of us. Poisons are really nasty. Being able to cure poisons is a big deal. Now, here's one of the most important spell lines for rangers and druids is Thistlecoat. Increases your armor class, and everything that attacks you takes damage back. if you're tanking, it's free damage and it's armor class. You're going to keep this up at all times on a ranger. If you have a druid in your group, his is going to be higher level. Let them take care of it. But if you're soloing or there is no a druid in your group, Thistle Coat goes on whoever's tanking for your group. Camouflage. Outdoor only invisibility. It's kind of a shame it doesn't work indoors, but Rangers are masters of the outdoors. Makes sense to me. It's actually, when it comes up, it's incredibly useful. And Rangers get a Ranger-only piece of armor with a true invisibility clicky. So you can still cover... I should have covered that in Rogues and Monks too. Is the clicky items. They get a nuke. Oh, it's actually not very mana efficient compared to Flame Lick. It's an emergency nuke. If you're using this, something's probably going wrong. Grasping Root is exactly what it sounds like. It's a root. It deals direct damage, so be careful. It'll break a mez if you root a mez target. It'll break the mez. But this allows you to do something called root rotting, which is where you root the target and you cast your line of dots, and then you just sit down and wait for them to kind of burn to death. Ranger's one of the root rot classes. Invoke Lightning. Invoke Lightning is very, very neat because it allows quad kiting. And yes, Rangers can, not as good as Druids, but they can quad kite. You can pull 4 mobs with Spirit of Wolf up. And when you get a lead, you crack them with lightning and you hit all 4 of them at the same time. So it's an, access to some AoE damage. Panic Animal. Here's your animal fear I was talking about, which allows you to fear kite. You snare the target. You cast Panic Animal on it, and then you run behind it, beating its head in. It lets you take on some things that would normally kill you, or kill other classes who can't fear kite. It's a very effective soloing method. Outdoors. I do it in South Carolina all the time versus the big elephants. Or I'll do it in permafrost against mammoths. Fire Fist. It's an attack buff. Pretty simple. You get Endure Cold, which is your cold resist buff. Just like Fire Resist buff. If you're taking cold damage, cast it, take it off your bar, put something you need on it. You've got Ignite. It's another nuke. Not nuking with spells is a tool in your toolbox. It's not something you're going, like, that's good for you to do. If you want to nuke with spells, play a Druid. Druids get these way, 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 way earlier. If you're casting Ignite on a target, something's probably gone wrong. You should be meleeing it. You'll do more damage meleeing it, more than likely. Light Healing. It's an upgraded version of Heal. You'll probably keep this on your toolbar just for patching up. Enduring Breath is Water Breathing. Just a utility spell. Hey, Bearson. How you doing, bud? Skin Like Rock. The next step in the AC and hit point buff, just like the Druid line. Cure Disease. Diseases can be nasty and they can last a long time. You get it really, 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 really late in your life. Actually, I think you're the last class to get it who has access to it. But it can make things less annoying. Harmony. This is a true frenzy radius reduction. It's what's called a lull, which makes things less aggressive. Once again, not your job, but if you're the only person in a party who can do it, do it. Another Thistle line, because the Stinging Swarm. Now, here's another one of the important Ranger DPS spells. Because you want to spend as little time casting spells as possible in combat. So how do you get the most damage for the least amount of cast time? Dots. And this also helps you with your root rotting. You cast Stinging Swarm, and you go back to beating its head in. So you'll Flame Lick, Stinging Swarm. Now they've got 2 dots ticking, and you're kind of a living dot. Strength of Earth, Strength buff. It's a raw damage increase. If nobody else in your party is buffing your strength, buff your strength. Infravision's nice, lets you see a little better in the dark. Not as big a deal now as it used to be, but still a big deal. Spirit of Wolf. This spell is so coveted, so necessary for so many classes to solo or just get around effectively, that once you hit level 28 as a ranger, you can make money just casting the spell on people. People will come up to you like, hey, I'll give you 20 plat if you cast a Spirit of Wolf on me. And you're like, sure, bud. And you cast on them, and off they go. They get nothing at 29 till Lukeland and Plains of Power. They get a Cancel Magic, which is you remove a magic effect from yourself. They get a new Thistle spell. It's the same thing as just another one in the line. AC buff, return damage to things that hit you. Calm Animal is an animal mez. Kind of think of like sheep from World of Warcraft, but it only works on animals. Another healing spell. It just heals for more. See Invisible is nice. It lets you see invisible. It's pretty self-explanatory. Levitate. It lets you float above the ground, so now you're not swimming in water anymore. You can run across the top of it. You can float on lava, and you no longer take fall damage because you're floating. And if you run up a hill and then off the hill, you slowly descend, so it lets you run over top of dangerous areas because you're up in the sky. Very, 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 very nice. In Velius, you get Call of Sky. Now, this is a very cool spell. You cast it on your self, and you have a chance that when you attack, that you basically hit the target with lightning. It stuns them and does damage. Very, very good aggro. One of your key aggro generation spells. When you get access to it. Let's see. Oh, God, I lost my place. Spirit of Wolf, Calm Animal, See Invisible, Bramble Coat, Levitate, Call of Sky. Here we go. You don't get your attack line until Luckland, sadly. See, like I said before, Luckland Rangers really come online. Careless Lightning. It's another nuke. Hopefully, you have better things to use with your Nana than nuking. It's fun, and you'll do it occasionally. But usually, you have better things to do than spending your mana on nukes. If you want to nuke with a nature-based class, play Druid. Skin Like Steel, AC HP buff. Spike Coat, Shield of Brambles. Now, Spike Coat is neat in that you can Spike Coat you can only cast on yourself. Shield of Brambles you can cast on other people. Like Barb Coat's the same way. There's the Thistle spells you can cast on other people. The Coat spells are self-only, which lets you stack. You get multiple damage shields, which is really nice. And the self ones are just stronger. Which is nice. It's a reason to roll Ranger if you just want to return. You want to be all spiky. And you don't like hugs. Now, Emily. Finally, we get a upgrade to Flame Lick. Decrease HP per tick, reduce armor class. It's just a straight upgrade to Flame Lick. Does more damage, reduces AC by more, generates more aggro. Ensnaring Roots. It's another line in your damaging root spells. Now remember, keep in mind with the Ranger roots here, is they take damage and then are rooted. So this will break mezzes. Upgrade to your fire resist, upgrade to your outdoor invisibility. Wolf form is really neat. You turn into a wolf, you get an attack bonus, you look like a wolf, and you get Spirit of Wolf on yourself. All in all, it's all really nice things for Rangers. Call of Flame is another one of your fire nukes. Jolt is really, really, really useful when you get it. You get it at level 50 with a Ranger, and you're going to be casting this quite a bit in raids for the rest of your career as a Ranger, because it lowers your aggro by 500, and you don't want to... You can tank if you have to in raids, but you don't want to be the tank. You take too much damage. Strength of Nature. It's attack and HP buff. Resistant Discipline. It's a resistance buff. You get a new snare at level 51, which is replaced by, I think, Tangle and Luckland. I forget what the difference between Tangle and a snare is. I'm actually not 100% sure. Because that's in Luckland. Why do they get two? Oh. Snare does cost less mana. I don't know. I'm actually not sure what the difference between these two is. That somebody smarter than me is going to have to go over that. Flame Strike, another single target nuke. Storm Strength, an upgraded version of your strength buff. Drones of Doom, upgrade of your Stinging Swarm. Just another dot. You've got Skin Like Diamond, an upgrade to your AC hit points. Now you're gonna notice there's a lot of this is starting to get into just upgrades of older spells. Then you have Chloroplast. Now Chloroplast is an HP buff. You gain HP or HP over time. It lasts quite a long time for what it is. It lasts what's the duration? 19 protect 12.7 minutes of increased HP regeneration. It's very, very lovely and very useful for any of your friends who are starting new characters. Like when you're already a higher level, hit them with the Chloroplast, hit them with the Brambles, hit them with Spirit of Wolf, and let them run around as Superman for a while, just having no cares in the friggin' world. Skin Like Nature, another upgraded armor class and HP buff, upgraded Root at level 60. And it just goes on from there. Now we're going to go back over to skills. Rangers can use one-handed blunt, one-handed slashing, two-handed blunt, two-handed slashing. It's a nice array of very powerful weapon skills. They are the kings of archery, even if archery doesn't get really good until Lucklin. Bind Wound, but they don't. Bind Wound's not as useful for them because they have access to a healing line. Defense, hand-to-hand offense, piercing as another weapon skill. They have Taunt. So Taunt is like it is in any other MMO. Move to the top of a hate list. So they can taunt off and get aggro on something that's, say, hitting your cleric. Throwing, not important for Rangers. They have archery. They get kick for extra damage, dodge at level 8, to increase their survivability, dual wield at 17, and you're going to spend a large portion of your Ranger life dual wielding. There's some nice two-handers for Rangers, but you would rather dual wield if you have the option to. Parry for more survivability at 18, double attack at 20, riposte at 35, and once again, riposte much more useful in Rangers because you actually... I tank constantly when I play a Ranger. I'm always tanking. Now, a couple of miscellaneous skills. Alcohol tolerance, not as useful for Ranger because you actually want to keep your wisdom high. Bag fishing, sense heading, as said, not super important. Especially in a TLP, you don't need sense heading anymore. Swimming is nice, lets you move faster in water. That'll come up as time goes. But here's the thing. You are the king of forage and track. Forage lets you find food and water out in the wild. There actually will get to a point where you probably don't have to buy food anymore in a Ranger if you don't want to. And track... When you walk into a zone and hit track, it'll give you a list, once you're max track, of everything in that zone. You just click, like, oh, I'm here to kill, I don't know, Quillmane. Or whatever that thing. I think it's Quillmane. Or you want to kill the Nightmare in Lava Storm. You hit track, it's up, click its name, and it'll just tell you where it is. And everyone else is out running around looking for it. You just get to go up and kill it. Sneak and hide. They do it like a rogue, nowhere near as good as a rogue, but they have access to it. They pay for their spell casting by having less disciplines, but they have one of the most powerful and necessary disciplines in the game for raiding. So they have the Fearless Discipline, like all melees, the a fear's incoming, you're going to smack it. True Shot, neat. 2 minutes of increased archery, and it doubles the damage of your archery shots. Then you have Weapon Shield Discipline. This thing is amazing. Focus all your combat reflexes, allow you to parry most melee attacks, parries all melee attacks from the front. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is that so much better than a Monk's Dodge Discipline? The reason it's better than a Monk's Dodge Discipline is Rangers generate way more threat. So what you end up doing is if you need a nice hefty threat. Like, okay, guys, we're having threat problems on this boss. The Ranger will run in with turn on weapon shield discipline, pull the boss, just dump all of its hate on this boss, and then a warrior taunts the boss off of him. And now that warrior has this massive aggro lead that he could never achieve on his own that a Ranger has given him. And a second one, and I'm sorry, Rangers, but when there's a boss who death touches, and what a death touch does, what it says on the din, if you get death touched, you're dead. Rangers are usually the dedicated death touch targets. Like, okay, the death touch timer's coming up in 10 seconds. Ranger, we need you to taunt. So you activate your weapon shield discipline. You taunt the boss. You're invincible for 18 seconds. You tank the boss for 10 seconds, and then you get death touched. And then you're dead. And that's your job sometimes. I'm sorry, but it's just... I actually love it because... I'll volunteer to be the first death touch target. You know, I was like, oh, man. Because then at the end, they give you loot. And you get to sit there dead. It's great. I love being a Ranger. You get to sit there and watch Netflix and get all your gear. I love it. Now, Rangers have a nice line of quests. Rogues get an easy epic. Rangers get 2 epics. They have, they get, let's see, planar gear. Let me see. No, that's not what we're looking for. Primary. Yeah, here it is. Earthcaller and Swiftwind. Is that what is that the one? No, it's not Swiftwind. What is it? Is it Swiftwind? I think it is Swiftwind. Let's double check. Swiftwind. Yes, it is Swiftwind. So Earthcaller is neat because it's got a snare. You have a chance when you hit things with your epic that they'll get snared and they just can't run away. So that generates tons of aggro. It's great for tanking. And then Swiftwind is really, really, really sweet because one of the most important stats in the game for melees is haste. And the Ranger Epic Sword Swiftwind comes with 40% haste out of the box. Now, you would prefer your haste to be on your armor, so that way you can switch your weapons out as needed for different things. But having access to 40% haste, pretty much guaranteed, is lovely. But Rangers are near and dear to my heart. I'm actually thinking about going Ranger during this TLP instead of Bard. Lay gasp! But, there we go. There is my EverQuest Melee class overview. I hope you liked it or learned something. And if not, well, you hurt my feelings. Tomorrow, I'll be doing this again, and I'm going over the tanks. Because somebody in the Discord has requested that I review Shadow Knight. And tomorrow's will be longer. There's not a lot to say about rogues, rather. They're a very simple class. I'm sorry if that felt short. It's a simple class that does its job. Same thing with monks. Not a tremendously complex experience. Rangers more so. Shadow Knights and Paladins, on the other hand, much more complex experiences. So I'll have to go over them much more in depth. And then I will also be doing another stream later on, probably after the TLP launches, where I'll get everyone prepared for the Luckwin through Pop experience. Thank you for joining in. I hope you had fun and learned something. And feel free to join the Discord, and I will leave links to Alakazam and P99 in the description. Have a good one.